Welcome, everyone. I know you're still getting some drinks back there and settling in, but I think this is going to be one of the more exciting panels discussions that you're going to see during this summit, which, by the way, hats off to Cody and Justin for another great summit. So thank you very much. We live in the information age. I think we can all agree on that. And it hasn't taken long for the information security to become one of the leading concerns for everyone, not just governments and businesses, but now individuals, more than ever, actually. And I believe, and from the people I've talked to, it is going to be the crime wave of the future, unfortunately, especially in the 20s. I can speak from this from a personal example. I have been victimized by cyber breaches and cybersecurity issues. So I know it's real. Personally, I know it's real. And some of this stuff you might hear today might sound pretty scary, actually, but it's not intended to scare you. It's intended to educate you on what's out there and what lays in the shadows, so to speak. We are blessed to have two amazing panelists with us today. John Gatti, who is a litigator in the entertainment industry. He has been a litigator for 30 years and has never lost a case. So think about that for a second. When I say we have some outstanding individuals up here who know their stuff.
That's because, if I can just interrupt, Rob,
sure.
That's because litigators can always turn a loss into a win. That's the only reason.
He's being humble. He's being humble, but he's outstanding. And also with us, of course, is one of the best cybersecurity experts in the world, quite literally the globe. Tommy Allen has an unbelievable record of human intelligence, signal intelligence. He has worked throughout sub-Saharan Africa. He knows more about the continent of Africa than probably anybody in the world. And when I say he is dialed in on cybersecurity on a global scale, and he understands the intelligence community, probably nobody understands it better than Tommy. So we are blessed to have Tommy Allen with us as well today. So let's just jump in. We're gonna start out just asking some pretty basic questions and try to get an understanding of what cybersecurity means, not only to governments and businesses, which we all have a concern about. We all have a collective, but what is it going to mean to you individually? Because that's what's next. That's the next chapter to unfold. Is these operators from overseas and from within the United States, not to scare you too much, but they're coming after you individually. And so what can we do about that? So I'll throw this out to John here to begin. In the entertainment industry, we've seen headlines in the past. Sony being a great example, and you and I both know Amy Pascal, who was a victim of that. They put out a movie, The Interview, comedy, kind of ripping on North Korea, and then they were attacked. Emails exposed, and careers ended, unfortunately. And that's very real. We know that to be real. What can we expect? You know, I mean, I know that happened in the entertainment world, but you're seeing it more and more, I would imagine, as a litigator and someone who deals in invasion of privacy and defamation. How did that, I guess, rock the entertainment world, or what kind of message did that send to all of us?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's an interesting and developing area. The one thing I say when I talk to my clients, that I think the most frustrating thing is that I'm usually talking to them after they've been attacked and they've been a victim. And the issue is really, what does the law say? Unfortunately, like a lot of things in the laws maybe, I'd be nice and say it's 10 steps behind the technology and the bad actors. So part of the frustration I see with clients is really the law doesn't necessarily address the issue at hand or the technology at hand. So we're always fighting that battle in the court, from the legal side of how is the law addressing the technology and the various issues. A recent study said that media and entertainment companies have been the subject of cyber attacks. 44% of media and entertainment companies have been hit, and these are significant hits. And unfortunately, what we learn is that, we're all using the internet, we're getting on Wi-Fi and at Starbucks, and we don't think much of it at the airport. And the thing to think about is that, as an organization or as an individual, we're only as strong as the weakest link in our organization. So it could happen at the lowest level. You can have an issue where you're putting in a lot of protections, but someone's assistant clicks on a phishing email, and next thing you know, they've gained access. One thing I've learned why, you look at it and you say, why is the entertainment industry or the media companies a target? A lot of times it has to do with the information we have. One is the hackers can profit from it. Orange is the New Black was a TV show that got hit and hacked. 10 episodes got released ahead of time. So for all of you successful businessmen and businesswomen out there, if you all of a sudden your distribution was hijacked and you couldn't make any money now based on the distribution, that's one reason why it's driving it. It's profitable. The other thing is it involves celebrities, people like yourself and others who have information that can either be valuable in extortion, it can be valuable in business because it has a lot of private information on contracts and different things like that, or it could have some very personal information that people want to know about celebrities and actors and others. So there was a hack in New York of a big law firm, the Grubman law firm, and they were held with ransomware, and they were held for a large amount of money, and a lot of celebrities' information got hit because of that. And it's also, the entertainment world has been, COVID, everyone got used to working remotely. And in the entertainment world, they've been working remotely for a long, long time. And they also work internationally, and they're distributing digital. We deal with digital assets a lot. So there's a lot of exposure to digital areas, and protections or lack of protection has become an issue. So that kind of sums up why the entertainment industry has been hit. There are a lot of, along the creative trail, there are a lot of footprints in the digital area to create these assets. And you can protect your organization, but you may have a vendor that has a special effects house that's working on the film that has to have access and then is distributing it. And they're not as strong as your organization. So there are weak links in the chain, and it's very difficult for an organization and individuals to tighten that chain and make sure you are really as safe as you should be.
Yeah, very, very true. And Tommy, let me ask you, I'm sure with your depth of knowledge and experience dealing with, I mean, state actors, I mean, we're talking some real James Bond, high level stuff. Do you just roll your eyes when you see how pathetic our security is and how ignorant we all are?
No, it's interesting, but I'd like to thank Nick, Carter, and David for what they were talking about earlier, because I think a lot of what they were saying really applies in our world. So we all come at this sort of through the lens of our past experiences. And when I say we, people that have been in this industry. And so I'd like to give a little bit of background first on a couple of things before we jump into this. And that's yesterday we had two individuals that flew for Air Force One and flew, F-16s. Well, the interesting thing about that is that they're flying in a very dangerous environment, et cetera. Well, when you look at where we were operating from and the lens from that side of it, it's not only dangerous, but it's unforgiving. So when we looked at those aircraft above us, many times we'd have 8, 7, 8, 9 layers of aircraft. So we'd have Kiowas, Apaches, we'd have UH-47s, Blackhawks, we'd have Predator drones, we'd have Reaper drones. But each one of those had a role to play in our organization. And when you're on the ground like that, what we really needed was the situational awareness as well as the technologies that we were using. So one particular piece that we had was a device that was used by L3. And L3 created it so that we could get a digital picture of what we called the asymmetric battlefield, or the battle space, the landscape. So when we looked at that, it provided us with imagery. It provided us with linguistic, notes, if you will, on targets, et cetera, but it helped us to prosecute those targets. So what we found is that when we've moved over into the space, into the sort of the commercial and the civilian space, we wanted to bring with us those technologies. And I think that's what's come out of a lot of this, as Michael Cyrus and some of us have talked about before, is that there's so many technologies that have moved from the battle space, if you will, from the military into the commercial arena. And we heard this morning when we were talking about genetics, and having been involved in future soldier programs with SOCOM and JSOC and DevGru, Delta, et cetera. Those are all things that we're looking at. And it's really around how do we do things better? Well, in the cyberspace, it's, to your point, we look at some of these things and it's so simple, the solutions, but yet we're not doing enough around it. And part of that is education. I would argue that all these things that we talk about, ransomware attacks, supply chain, lack of cybersecurity awareness, all these IoT vulnerabilities, your cell phones, et cetera, a lot of that is simply education and simply getting people to understand how vulnerable they are. Now, in a room like this, where you have VCs, you have economists, you have, individuals with high net worth, you're vulnerable, and you're vulnerable for a number of reasons. And so what we typically do on a daily basis is we're looking at the deep web, we're looking at the dark web, and we're looking at vulnerabilities that exist for each and every one of you. Well, I would argue right now, 75% of the individuals in this room, if we go out and look, we'll find vulnerabilities on the dark web. Now, those mean nothing in and of itself by themselves. But when you start linking Michael Cyrus's credit cards with another individual that has the passwords and the logins, that means something to me. And so typically what we look for in especially cases with, stars, et cetera, high net worth, is we're looking where that information is coming from. And so we started to use a process that Lockheed developed, which is threat intelligence. And so everybody thinks there's a panacea for success, that there's one cyber tool. And we've got a lot of VCs out here. There's billion-dollar cyber companies, but they're still vulnerable. They're still getting hit on a regular basis, a daily basis. And the reason for that is that we haven't wrapped our, heads around what the process should be. And so that's, we can get into it more, but there's a lot of details around this process that it's not just a cyber tool. It's more importantly, it's things that we did in the military, which combine lots of different subject matter experts, subject matter, pieces, if you will, components that allow us to go after cyber criminals. So if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it doesn't seem real at times. It really doesn't. It doesn't say, oh, well, that's something else. They're going after some bigger fish in the pond or whatever. But it's I think that's what's happening now, is it's transitioning down to more of an individual level. Again, because I've experienced it. I know what it's like to be hacked. I know what it's like. It's not fun. It's terrifying. It changes your life. So these threats are real. And if you can start preparing now, if you can start putting up some sort of fence or just being smarter in the way you conduct yourself day to day, it can make a big difference. This has nothing to do with my personal example or my situation, but I was filming down in Key West, and I was in a car with a bunch of the crew, and we were driving from one point A to point B. And I said, I just said out loud, I was like, God, I could go for a peanut butter parfait. Next thing I know, my phone lights up with Dairy Queen ads, right? Now that's terrifying, but it's I get it. It's marketing, it's a marketing thing. That seems not non-threatening, but think if a nefarious player was listening, because somebody was listening. Somebody heard me say I want a peanut butter parfait, and my phone lit up with Dairy Queen. So what if whoever was listening was nefarious and had bad intention? And what if they were listening? How long were they listening for? Were they listening when I got to my bedroom that night? Were they listening to, it goes on and on. So awareness is a huge thing.
Yeah. And it's, Rob, sometimes, we're talking a lot about the technology of it, but a lot of times, and I don't want to make everything so paranoid,
Yeah, exactly.
but it's also trust and understanding who you're allowing around you to have access, because I've had clients who have been very vigilant with the security that they've had on their digital assets and identity, but they let somebody human into the chain. Mm-hmm. And so that's always inevitable, but that's something I always have my clients take a look at too.
I think that's the fear, because the fear drives a lot of this stuff, and you don't want to live your life paranoid.
Yeah.
You don't want to live your life private investigating yourself and double checking everything and not being able to confide or open up or be human. But at the same time, we're starting to go down a path where you can't be foolish either. So what would you suggest for best practices?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, best practice, I say, Nick was saying earlier about they liked his laundry, folding the laundry and taking a moment to organize it before you do it. I look at that kind of example, and from a risk management, I tell my clients all the time, maybe take a few minutes before you buy the shirt that you're going to launder, because I'm in litigation, I do trials, and I see it all the time. And I have to have a poker face when we're in trial. And then, there's a flash of this email, and inevitably my client will go outside at a break. I have to keep a poker face like I love that email up there. And we walk outside and the client will say to me, gee, I wish I didn't write that email. And I go, yeah, that makes two of us. but take a moment, and what I say to clients, little free legal advice. Before you hit send on that email or text, read it. Think if you're not embarrassed to have it read out by a judge or read in front of a jury, then go ahead and hit send. And I know it's tough to do because we're all doing things in the fastest way we can, and we're in a digital age, but there's so much benefit to the digital age and how we communicate, but also from litigation and also just privacy issues. There are so many downfalls and things that you have to be concerned about. And more trials, frankly, are won and lost by the ill-advised text or the ill-advised email that was sent because someone didn't take the time. So what I'm saying is, you may be a victim of a hack. But and we go back to Amy Pascal and Sony Pictures, which for those of you who don't know, North Korea ended up hacking Sony Pictures. A lot of high C-level, C-suite executives got fired because they had just, in the course of doing business and doing business with friends, they made some off-color, emails or comments about other people in the industry, other powerful talent and other things, and they got hacked. And they didn't think this was ever going to come to light. They didn't mean it to. But when they got hacked by North Korea, which they did not expect to do, and this is a corporation that spent tens of millions of dollars to protect themselves, they get hacked, and next thing you know, these ill-advised emails cost people their jobs and their careers.
Yeah. Tommy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think one of the points that you brought up is, for the first time, I think in the last 3 years, we've had nation state activities. And when we talk about nation states, we're talking about China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, et cetera. These were targets that we went after, for decades. And now for the first time, we're starting to see them spill over into the civilian community, to the commercial sector. So Israel, 2 years ago, they had 17 companies that were hit using these nation state technologies, if you will. So for the first time, along with Sony, all these other, entities that have been hit by nation state activities, we're seeing more of that. So on a daily basis, when we look around, we're looking at someone's company in here. If you look at who's trying to breach that firewall, and it goes from Russian Federation out of Austin, Texas, it comes from China, Shanghai, Ukraine, et cetera. So one of the real values of this, if you can put a value on Ukraine, it's allowed us to have a window into what was going on there. So most of the digital currencies, mining operations, et cetera, were in Ukraine, as well as many of the server farms that are used by these groups. So it's no longer that it's just some 16-year-old kid out there. Now you're seeing nation states that are using proxies to get to companies because you have intellectual property, et cetera. So one of the things, just to piggyback on talking about IoT devices, is that, don't do what you don't need to do, on a cell phone. There's so many people that the minute they turn it on, all their emails are downloaded. So if I can get to your calendar, I can get to your system. So, there's things out there that if I'm in proximity, I can get your emails. I can get everything that's on that cell phone, whether it's an Android device, iPhone, et cetera. So it really comes down to, if you've got intellectual property, you've got technology, you've got photos, emails, narrative that you don't want into the general public, then don't put it on there, because it's vulnerable right now. And on a daily basis, we're hitting probably 17, 18 major corporations in this country that are being hit by either Iran, North Korea, or some of the proxies. And so that's really what you're looking at. It's not just a kid that's down the street now, and then they're taking that information, they're looking at information that's on the dark and the deep web, the jam networks, these chat rooms, et cetera. And I'm trying to piece together how I get to Scott. And that's the whole, that's the game of it. So it's very nefarious. But there's a lot of things you can do to, to solve those problems. And it's really around, I always go back to this, especially in the commercial sector, it's education and also knowing, and Nick brought this up, is, you've got Dropbox, you've got all these different components that people are using. They have no idea where they put emails from last year, but they're there still. And when we want them, we go get them. And that's the whole, so the basis of this is starting to change the mindset, security practices, et cetera. So
I called my daughter the other day and she immediately answered and said, "What's wrong?" They don't know how to use the phone anymore. So maybe we just go back to old school calling each other. It's a thought. Well, listen, I want to stay on schedule because I know we all want lunch. We are the speed bump before lunch. I get it. But let's go ahead and open it up to Q&A because I know there's probably some people out there that have some questions. I already see some, I see 3 or 4 hands right now. So I will please keep your hands in the air so the microphone can find its way to you. And we will take some questions from the crowd. Also, but as you get ready to ask your question, I'm going to reserve about 2 or 3 minutes at the end of this so that John can explain as a golfer what the legal issues are between the PGA and Live. Okay, so I am reserving some time for that. I am going to reserve.
We're leaving on a high note.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I believe, sir, you have the mic, or ma'am, you have the microphone.
Yeah, Oakley Ryan. One a comment and then a question. You were talking about high net worth, large institutions. I do work with the major medical center in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and they were hacked last year. And there were health care implications to patients receiving care. And that was real eye opener for me. I thought, I'm not big enough. They're not going to care. And that was huge. And then I learned about talk to my friends on hospital boards, and they're sitting ducks. So it's huge. So the question is, and it kind of builds off of the innovation conversation, is a lot of universities are investing in cybersecurity. We're talking to our high school kids as we don't have the manufacturing jobs. What are the jobs of the future? And we're spending time on that. And so from your perspective, and probably more for Tommy, what are the fields that, it's about our future. If you're 18, you're thinking about what's next. This is going to be huge, right? What would the fields you devise kind of the young professionals to look at?
I mean, clearly, machine learning, artificial intelligence, those pieces that revolve around cyber landscape. So we have technology that are coming out. They're great. But again, it's what's happening with our hospitals. We know China is going after education systems. They're going after healthcare. And it's not so much for tomorrow or the next day. It's for biometric data that they're taking. So TikTok, 78% of TikTok's data goes to server farms in China. And that still has not changed. So I would argue that, if you're a young woman or young man and you're getting into this, it's really about understanding, what this technology landscape is going to look like in 4 or 5 years. Because the hospitals right now, most of it is not even that it's a breach of technology. Everybody thinks the firewall, the wireless device. Why would I do that when I can go through your son or your daughter, through your IoT device from a social engineering standpoint? So when we talk about, nation state activities, again, we're looking at what we've done in the past to these countries. So now that all of a sudden is in the landscape. So you have 18-year-old kids that have studied the technology. They know how to get through the firewalls, but they don't even need to do that. They can go through your cell phone before you even hit the building. And that's the largest problem with the healthcare industry right now. There's all these bring your own device. There's all these IoT devices that are in there, printers, et cetera. So nobody looks at their printer inside of a building, but there's printers sitting outside most of the HIPAA regulated areas where those files should not be. But yet I'm taking everything because of that printer, or something's being printed. So I'm taking every document off of that printer. So there's a lot of things that, especially healthcare, that's our biggest problem. And during COVID, we had so much data that was stolen, even from St. George Hospital in St. George, Utah. And it's been across the board. So there's large entities out there, proxies, that are stealing that type of data. But I think there's probably better people here to answer the innovation question in terms of what that subject matter looks like. But I just know that coming when I talk to young military men and women that have security clearances, that's usually what we talk about, is that technology. What does that technology look like, and what is it going to look like in the future? And obviously things like JavaScript, stuff like that, that's not the answer. You need to really fundamentally understand how IoT devices work and how systems are interconnected. And that's the most important. That's what we failed to. That's what we're going to look at.
Tony, can I ask, Tony, so what's the goal here? What's the goal if I'm trying, why am I gathering data on all these patients at a hospital? I mean, is it ransom? Is it, what is it?
Yeah, so ransomware malware is one thing, but it's, we kind of touched on it, and it's one of the things that yesterday came up on this morning about biometric. And so there's always been this promise innovation, but again, somebody used the term product. So this is what's interesting. This is Russia has all my lifetime. Since they're my lifetime. They've been premier organization when it comes to stealing data that they can use that data to build something, whether that was MiG-28, et cetera. And that's what China and they're doing. In this case, the problem with it is it's personal data. It's all biometric data on citizens. It's not about technology. So the biggest thing that we see out there for the next 10 years is that this data is being used. We're not sure how they're going to use it. We know they're using biometric data, around that piece of it, and that's scary because we're not doing enough as a government to lock it down, and that's a real problem.
Great presentation so far. I'm not going to reveal my name just based on what you said. But in any event, I have a private equity fund. At any one time, I have 10 or 15 companies that we may own. Over the last 3 years, I'd say at any one time, 4 companies have been hit by cyber attacks. Most of what I do is, we call it value tech. And it's so initially, it always surprised me that technology companies were so vulnerable to attacks, but I've become less and less surprised. My real big issue is around getting cybersecurity insurance. And I chair all the audit committees, I guess, of all our portfolio companies, amongst other things. And so we're always beating up Marsh-Mac and the other guys to get us insurance. But those rates have tripled in just the last year. And they doubled or tripled the year before that. And every time, naively, we bring in consultants, they look at the companies. I mean, we do it when we diligence companies now and get all these indemnifications. I'm sure John knows that. But I have found that there's a total lack of transparency between the insurance companies. And as much as I say to these guys, hey, help me out here, what really do I need that will change things? No one knows other than rates are going up and, Chubb's no longer writing it and we're not getting this. And so do you guys, I don't know if you guys have visibility to that. Coincidentally, it's the season of the year where we have renewals. So I'd be interested in what you might be thinking about that as well.
I'll just speak to it. I agree with everything you just said. My clients have the same reaction, the same issues. And even if you can get the insurance, there's a lot of times so many exemptions to it that it really takes the teeth out of, whatever coverage you're getting. I don't really have a real answer to it. The only thing from a legal standpoint, I'm always harping on the laws need to be written in a better way that maybe it will assist the whole process, including the insurance process. My state of California, is a leader in this as far as data privacy statutes, so that they were the first one to, enact it. Invasion of privacy, personal information. They're the first one to put one out. And so I think it comes from that, I think, that'll eventually make its way through to the insurance process. But I wish I had a better answer, but we're facing the same thing.
So just one quick comment. So we worked a lot with Lloyd's of London on a lot of these policies. And one of the biggest problems that we had, whether it was oil fields in Nigeria, whether it was everyone remembers what took place in the Gulf with a platform. So in the early days of that, there were there were issues that popped up as a result of the due diligence. And it was sort of understood that, hey, there was some kind of an attack that took place on one of the wellheads. So one of the problems is defining what is a cyber attack. And so you're paying for insurance, but yet, to your point, is that there's all these things that are in the insurance policy that if you do this, it doesn't apply. If you do that, we're not going to pay you. Well, that's part of the problem. A ransomware malware attack, if it's hit in the right way and you pay that ransom, or it's proven that you were culpable and responsible because you didn't do this, you didn't change the server, patch or do something to it, they're not going to pay out. And so that's been the biggest problem. And Michael Cyrus and I dealt with this. We had maritime platforms in trying to get cyber insurance for a lot of the yachts out there. There's a lot of things that have to be done in order to get that insurance. And the problem is that some of it is just, it's onerous and it's too costly. And even when you do have insurance, I mean, how many people have seen cyber insurance being paid out? It's still a game at the moment. It's not I haven't seen one ransomware where it's been paid out. So. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. It always feels like to me, and I am about as lay person as you can find in this subject matter. But it always feels like to me, this is the Wild West, or, the mob stayed ahead of the feds for 100 years until RICO came along, until finally the government figured out a way to surround these guys and choke them out. Right. And I feel like we are decades away from being able to get a handle on this. And the best you can do is find guys like this, quite honestly.
And also quantum computing is going to change everything. So we're talking about microseconds now. So anything behind digital currencies, the whole blockchain component, which was supposed to be extremely secure. Now you're talking about, microseconds to change something with quantum computing. And the Chinese are going after that in a big way. And Honeywell, our companies here, they haven't really got a security handle around it of what those things look like. So over the next decade, we're going to see massive changes that I'm just hoping we can stay up with.
Absolutely. We are running out of time, so I'm going to put in my question about the PGA and the LIV. What are the legal issues surrounding this? You've probably seen it in the news. A bunch of PGA players have left the PGA to join the Saudi Arabia-backed golf league called LIV, whatever you want to call it, LIV. 54, that works too. And it's quite a kerfuffle, quite a dust up in the old golf world. But there are precedents being set right now that I find very fascinating for all sports going forward.
Yeah, I'm a big golfer myself. I know Rob is too, and it's interesting. It really comes down to, just this week the DOJ said they're going to start an investigation of it. So you're like, what's the big deal? Well, it's antitrust and it's anti-competition is really what it comes down to, and from the legal sense of it. The quick background, as you probably know, some golfers have gone off, PGA Tour members gone off to play in the LIV Tour backed by the Saudi sovereign fund. I think that's maybe the first issue in the problem. It's similar to the AFL, NFL days back when there were two competing leagues, but they eventually worked it out and merged. I think if this wasn't backed by the Saudi sovereign fund, I think we might be heading closer to a merger, and this would be the first step of it. The issue is really the PGA in their bylaws has two very specific bylaws that all PGA Tour members have to live by, and this is what is being viewed as potentially anti-competitive, which is they have to ask for permission to go to tour events outside the PGA. They have to get the commissioner's permission, and they're only allowed to get 3 exemptions within the United States. Okay, so, and the commissioner has full discretion to deny this. And that's what, up to this point, the PGA has taken a very firm approach and has denied everybody and has suspended them. And some of the players, to try to get out of the rules, have voluntarily quit the tour and hoping that it'll allow them to continue on in some PGA Tour events. The most recent legal issue came up in the Scottish Open just was 2 weeks ago. And a couple of the players from the Live Tour wanted to play Scottish Open. Scottish Open is the Royal Golf Association. Yeah, Royal and Ancient. And they ended up going to court. And the Scottish court actually entered a temporary restraining order injunction to allow them to play. So that was kind of the first crack in the issue here about whether or not they're going to be able to play. And you see now, if you turn the British Open on, you will see them playing at the British Open. But the PGA Tour is adamant here, and it looks like it's going to be, heading to court eventually if they don't resolve it. And as I said at the beginning, I think if this tour had been funded by an American group or a German group, a UK group, I think we'd be having a different conversation, and they would probably be moving toward a merger and some working out of it. I think there's so much political issues, so much social issues with the Saudis, and there have been protests around all of the events, that it has taken the PGA to have to take the stance of saying, we're drawing the line in the sand, we're not going to do it. So it is interesting, it's going to play out. And one of the issues is that the Live Tour has been paying an astronomical amount of money to get the PGA Tour players to jump ship. We're talking about Phil Mickelson getting $200 million. And that's going to be eventually what you see it play out in the courts. That's going to be the damage that the Live Tour says the anti-competitive nature of this has caused them, because they're going to say, we had to pay exorbitant amounts to get people to play in our tour, and this is the anti-competitive reason why this is antitrust. And that's the way it's going to play out. And well, it's interesting. We'll see how it goes. It's a lot of PGA Tour players are pissed off at a lot of other PGA Tour players. And I think, my own 2 cents on it, I think it's a little short-sighted on some of these pros, especially the younger ones. They're going to get a quick buck right now. Phil Mickelson, maybe he did an assessment, said $200 million in my pocket. I'm at the end of my career, maybe that's it. But these guys are, making, some of the clients I have are making $40-50 million a year in endorsements. Endorsements are being pulled left and right. They're not supporting these people who have jumped ship. So in the short term, they're picking up a quick dollar, a big number. But I think, if you went out 20-30 years and reputationally, and the issue is really, I'll end it with this, is that the PGA Tour, they've always had problems with some of the level A, the top tier guys, the Phil Mickelsons of the world, who always say, hey, we're driving the tour, we're driving all the revenue. Tiger Woods also, but Tiger Woods is different. He has been perfectly fine to work with the PGA Tour and understand that the PGA Tour, when they take in this revenue, they're supporting junior golf, they're supporting the women's PGA, the LPGA, there's the senior tour, they're growing the game and the good of the game, and that's what they're doing. Some of the top tier players that have jumped have said, no, that should become more of that bottom line should be coming to us. Forget about these other programs, find another way to fund them. And that is the
Yeah, it really has become a chasm. It really, it's very diverging. And I've heard arguments like that was a very good argument. I think trying to understand the PGA side of it. I've heard the arguments on the other side too, from a business model. I think one thing that I heard in support of the Live was Tiger Woods in his career on the golf course has made about 121 million on the course. Now he makes $1 billion outside of that, but on the course, his earnings. And for a guy like Dustin Johnson, who got a guaranteed 125 million guaranteed, like golfers don't get guaranteed money. And so to get that guaranteed money, and he only has to play in 8 tournaments, that's a lifetime earnings for Tiger, 121 on the course. So these guys can grind all day, travel all over the country, spend their whole year grinding and making cuts, not making cuts, getting paid, not getting paid, up and down, away from their family, or they can get that guaranteed big chunk of money up front, spend a lot of time with their family and play in 8 tournaments. So, so a lot of those guys are like, I'll take the break.
Yeah. And, no,
And so I think that's why,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
to your point though, you bring up a lot of really good points about.
Well,
why.
and the thing is, whether you like Tiger Woods or not, you have to respect his decision, because I've heard the number floated that he was being offered close to $1 billion to jump ship. And he made a moral and sort of a decision that says my credibility, my legacy is worth more than I can't be bought. And so that really comes down. I can't fault either side
Absolutely,
of it.
absolutely.
There's everyone has a personal decision to make.
But this gets resolved in the courts.
It does get resolved.
It gets resolved in the
Yeah.
courts. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Give a big round of applause for our panel members.